Hi, I'm Julie Kukenberger, the Superintendent in the Scarborough Public Schools. Thank you for tuning in and watching our second episode of Inside Scarborough Public Schools. This episode, we're going to stay right here in Central Office and learn about the FY18 budget development process. So we're here in my office. I'm with Kate Bolton, our school business manager. Is that your official title, Kate?
I have so many titles. I'm the Director of Business and Finance, but it doesn't fit in any form, so I just say business manager. It's quicker.
And Kate really is the lead in our budget work. She guides us through the process, makes sure that we're looking in every nook and cranny and analyzing all of the existing resources that we have, but also helping us plan for how we can best maximize our resources to meet our future needs in order to ensure that our students get the best education that we possibly can deliver.
Absolutely. So a big part of the budget process is what I like to call, in a technical way, putting price tags on things. And we really need to start our budget process by finding out each year where we are in the current year. What are we spending? What are the resources that we're using today as a baseline and a starting point for our budget discussions. So when Julie came on board, we had an opportunity to reflect on our typical budget building process and try to think about whether we wanted to do things in the same way or whether we wanted to switch things up a little bit for her benefit or with some of the ideas that she brought to us from the outside. Would you say that's fairly accurate, that we talked about what we did do and then talked about what we could do differently?
Yeah, I mean, from the time I came on board in all of the one-on-one conversations that I had had with different community members and the different groups that I had met with, the one thing that kept coming up was the budget. Pay mind to the budget, do what you did last year. A lot of people were giving me the feedback that the budget process was really successful, and I knew that there had been a lot of improvements done. So I wanted to be able to look closely and ask a lot of questions without disrupting a process that had proven to be successful in the past. So in order to do a really in-depth review of our personnel, I thought it was necessary, being new to the leadership team, to really get a sense of what are the skills and attributes that we look for in every single employee. So part of what we did in this conversation was, of course, analyzing enrollment projections to just know how many teachers will we need, how many support staff will we need in order to support our students. And we did that really just by advancing, the current first grades to second grade, the current second to third, all the way up through. So we could get a sense of, was there any place where we could find efficiencies? And then we talked about what are the parameters for the appropriate class size in Scarborough? What do we believe developmentally class sizes should be? And then how is that supported by best practice or evidence-based practice? So it was not just looking at those enrollment projections, but really looking clearly at, what are the parameters. And then each leader had 5 Post-it notes, and they wrote one skill or attribute on each Post-it note that they would look for in any employee, anyone who would be employed by the Scarborough Public Schools. Because if 76% of our budget is human resources, we have to really make sure that we're recruiting and retaining the very best staff for our students, both in the classroom and in supporting the classroom in our custodial positions, in our health services, and in our other student support services. And so once we had those skills and attributes individually identified, we literally sorted them on a wall, and we saw where did we have similar thinking and where was there difference thinking. And this was a really engaging conversation that I thought was essential, so that as we then talked about what are the vacancies, who are those probationary folks, what positions are we going to be hiring for this year, we could start to calibrate our thinking. And that also led to later on discussions of looking at our system as a whole and saying, how are we currently using our existing resources, and can we find efficiencies within our existing resources without compromising the effectiveness of our programming. So another really important step leading us through this budget process.
And in this portion of the budget development, what we're looking at is mostly the discretionary spending, which means supplies, books, equipment, contracted services. But in this case, we were also focusing really carefully on personnel and talking about some of the reallocations of our resources that we might attempt and try to realign the folks that we currently have working for us to meet the needs of some of the newer initiatives that we've got on our plate.
Yeah, and so I would think, I would just add to that, during that first phase, that level services phase, when we're trying to figure out what do we need just to maintain status quo, although it might have added more work to the process or drew out some of the meetings longer, what that really allowed me to do was assume nothing and just ask lots of questions. And then taking those bits of information from each of those one-on-one meetings, I was able to really sort of synthesize what people were asking for or what the needs were or the common needs across the district, and then think really creatively about our organization to see if there were ways that we could find efficiencies. And Kate and I together being able to be a part of all of those conversations then of course provoked many reflective conversations outside of that. So really leading to what I think is a smart, a fiscally responsible and credible budget for the FY18 cycle.
Absolutely. I think that typically we do question everything. We go line by line through each person's budget and dig into detail from spending from the prior year, spending in the current year, identifying what it is exactly that we're spending those monies on for each individual line of our budget, which exceeds 600 GL accounts.
Tell us what GL means.
General ledger account. Sorry, that's accountant speak. But individual line items in the budget. So it can get pretty complex. It can get a little bit nerdy. But I think that what Julie helped us do was to keep the big picture in place and again question to say, well, yes, we have done it that way. But is there a way to do it more efficiently? Is there a way to do it more effectively? Are we really meeting our goals with the resources that we're asking for and where we're asking for them?
And I think one of the things I would want the community to know about this phase or of just the budget cycle itself, the budget process itself, is that it's really interesting to be midway through the year, or not even quite yet midway through the year, and reflecting on those past investments while still thinking about what do we need to do to continue to grow to our goals by the end of the year, and planning next year all at the same time. So it really gets fairly complex pretty quickly when you're trying to think in all of those different fiscal years.
Yeah,
as we're planning.
In my world, I'm never in the right year because I'm conducting the audit on the prior year while I'm building the budget for the next year. I never get to live in the present.
The budget cycles never stop.
No, it just keeps on going.
So that's phase one of the budget planning process here in the Scarborough Public Schools. Phase one is where we really look at those level services. What does it take to continue all of the existing programming?
Right.
And so the second phase is what we call the student-centered budget. And during this phase, this is where the Leadership Council comes up with individual proposals based on student needs in each of their individual schools or departments.
Right, and the student needs budget, the idea is to advance proposals for investment, for new investment or reallocation of resources to go in a different direction or to add resources to what we have now. So you start with level services, which is status quo, what we do today, we do tomorrow, with minimal shifts in terms of students moving through the phases and their needs changing. The student-centered budget is, okay, what do we need to do next to further our goals, to advance our improvement targets, and what new things do we need to focus on.
And I like to think about this as like the innovation phase. This is where I push leadership to think really creatively about, what if you were going to truly create the school that would meet your students' needs in the very best possible way. Really, I encourage them to think, that outside of the restrictions of the current budget, so that they can come up with as many creative ideas as they can in order to accelerate the advancement of our work towards those long-term goals that we have.
Absolutely. I think that it's important to know, though, that even although we're having a conversation about things that might not necessarily be achievable during the current budget cycle. So in a sense, it's a dreaming process. Mm-hmm. It's not a crazy dreaming process. Right. It's clearly linked to the improvement targets that folks have identified. It's clearly linked to what they know is going to be the next step in their building or their phase or their department to advance toward their targets. So it's a dream, but it's not a random dream. It's very focused and very calibrated to the goals that we've set.
Absolutely. And so the process for that is that each individual principal or department head actually creates a proposal in writing and submits that to Kate. And it outlines really specifically what the need is. Is there a possibility for them to reallocate or realign resources? Is this an additional request? What is the evidence that supports this need? And so they do that first in writing and submit that to you. Yep. And then when we come together as that 21-person leadership council team that includes all of the district leaders and building leaders, that's when we started to have folks present their proposals, and then we literally sorted them as a team. And we looked at what are some of the high priorities, what are the mid priorities, and what are the low priorities. Again, so that we're looking at the whole system, K-12, and really balancing the needs and establishing current priorities.
I think that one of the reasons that the student needs-based budget or the student-centered budget is so helpful is that it does map things out in a more than 1 year trajectory. Mm-hmm. It does clearly connect us to our goals. And I mean, we have talked in past years, and we've even made a stab at putting together a multi-year budget. It turns out to be a really difficult exercise because in the second year of a 2-year budget, things have changed so much that you almost end up throwing out a lot of what you have done and starting over. But it does, building the student-centered budget does show mm-hmm. us year over year where those needs are, and if we continue to fund on the slower level, but towards the same goals, then the student-centered budget gives us the roadmap. Right.
And I think we've seen that even in this budget development process, that a plan was crafted and created 2 years ago to help to transition the high school into a new schedule. And as we've gone through this process and we've looked at priorities and we've assessed current need, we've evolved and we've made different recommendations in this mission critical budget. And I think that is, to Kate's point about trying to plan a multi-year budget, that is a challenge because you can't necessarily predict the future, but we still go through that exercise with our student-centered budget so that we have something to reflect on and we can, make those adjustments. But I think the key part of that is being really flexible and nimble in the budget process and saying, okay, I thought this was going to be my priority. Is that still the priority for my school or for my department? And that has been a lot of work for our leadership to really be going through that cognitive exercise, but then also going back and saying, what evidence do I have to support these things that I'm asking for or these adjustments that I'm making?
But it does, it is a critical step to make sure that you are reflecting on what it is that you've asked for in the past, and does it still make sense? That's where I think some of these reallocations and realignments come into place, because there are a number of places in the budget that we'll be presenting where we've taken folks who are doing one job and repurposed them to do a different job. Mm-hmm. We've taken funding that's gone in one direction and put it into another direction that's more critical to us. So without a constant revisiting and reflection on what we have and where we're headed, we wouldn't be able to do those things. So you'll sometimes hear folks talk about a zero-based budget, and that was one of the things Julie asked me when she came on board, did we do a zero-based budget? And my answer was no, because there's so many things that really don't change, that continue one year after another. But that doesn't mean that we don't do a reflective budget, that we don't just assume here's what we have today and therefore we will need exactly that tomorrow plus a few more things.
Yeah, that was definitely not the process we engaged in this year.
No.
So let's talk a little bit about communication.
Okay.
I know this is something that we're working on. It's a personal goal for me as the superintendent. I know that huge gains were made last year with the creation of the budget book and the collaborative presentation of the budget, one town, one budget. What are some of the communication practices that we've continued from last year to this year in order to make sure that our community is really informed about how this work is unfolding?
Well, we've gone at it from a number of angles. We do have right now a joint town council and school board finance committee. Each of those bodies has their own finance committee, and the two of them have joined together. 2 years ago they started that process so that we could actually develop a budget that was a little more holistic, a little bit less, the school board brings their budget to the town and the town doesn't really know what's going on with it. And vice versa, that the school board doesn't really have a lot of insight into what's going on in the municipal budget. So being a part of that, I think that's been extremely valuable. We have had twice a month meetings this year, starting in January. And one of the big themes has been about communication.
Absolutely.
And lack thereof and missing pieces and, how is it that the community is going to be able to come on board and understand what we're doing here? Because, we've been sitting here chatting for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and it's complicated, and we haven't even quite finished yet. So,
and there's lots of other pieces that we haven't mentioned
exactly.
in the process. So.
Exactly. So the joint meetings are great. They're filmed, they're broadcast on the local cable channel, and they're open to the public.
And available on the town's website?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah,
I think that all of those those recorded meetings, I think, are available on the town's website. So the other piece that Julie referenced is that we have now got a narrative budget book, which in years past, the school budget has been presented in a format that was pretty dry. I think I mentioned those 600 GL accounts, which you all know that means general ledger now. GL accounts that were listed in rows and, here's this account and this amount and this percent change from the prior year and this much we spent. And it's super boring. It doesn't really give you a lot of insight into what's actually being done with those resources.
For our students.
For our students. Yeah. What's actually going on in the schools. So a few years ago, the town started doing a narrative format for their budget. We stole it at their encouragement. We were happy to steal it. And so when you look at the municipal budget, including the town, including the schools as a department, you're going to see a real story about what's going on in your community in Scarborough. You're going to have a chapter for Public Works, and they're going to describe how many roads they plowed and how many trash barrels they picked up and all of the things they paved, and they're going to be telling you what it is that you're getting for your tax dollars. When you get to the school department's section of the budget, we're hoping that you'll be able to actually have a window into the schools to see a little bit more about what's been going on there, a little bit more about what is included in the school department's budget and where the money is going, and perhaps gain a little bit of understanding as to what it is that we're asking you to vote for and asking you ultimately to pay for.
And this video in and of itself is an effort to improve that communication as well. So we've been trying to, tweet out little messages after joint town council and school board finance committee meetings, but also putting out chunks of information, getting some feedback from the community with the community survey. So a lot of effort to make this process really transparent. And our hope is that you'll join us on April 5th at the town council meeting for the first reading of the budget, and then again on April 6th at the school board meeting meeting for the first reading of the FY18, fiscal year 18 school department budget. And then we also want to let everyone know that we're having a budget forum, much like has been done in the past, and that's what the survey was really about. How can we improve that budget forum? And that's happening towards the end of April at the Wentworth School at 7 o'clock. So that's Wednesday, April 26th at the Wentworth School at 7 o'clock, and everyone's welcome to join us for that. And that's really the Q&A part, where we will get some questions ahead of time and then be able to provide answers to our community so that they can clearly understand the budget that's presented to them.
Right. And I would say that for those of you who are interested in looking for more information about the budget, including calendars of meetings, including documents when the budget itself is posted, and some background information, some presentations, all of those things are being posted on what we're calling the budget portal, which is a page on the town's website. And we were going to sort of show a way to navigate to that.
So in order to find the budget portal that we're talking about, we're starting here at the Scarborough Public Schools webpage, and then you're going to scroll over here on the side menu and click on the word budget. And when you get there, it takes you to the whole budget and planning and approval process. If you go midway down, you'll see that there's a link to the joint town and school budget page. We're going to click on that. And then this takes you to the town of Scarborough's website, so you could also find it directly there. But we went in through the school budget or through the school page, and so then this walks you through the survey results, also minutes.
So now that we've shown you how to get to the budget portal on the website, I should say that there isn't much there right now. What we're hoping for is that folks will find that to be their starting place for information retrieval once the budget is presented. The budget presentation, the first reading of the budget for the town council, is a presentation that's done by the town manager and the superintendent together. It contains a lot of really useful information and context about the budget. So if it's possible for folks in the community to come out and to listen to that meeting, that's awesome. There's also the school board's first reading the next day on April 6th. In the evening at 7 p.m. There'll be a school board workshop, which is open to the public on April 6th in the afternoon.
From 1:30 to 6 o'clock.
Right?
Yep.
And all of these will be the first time that the full school board and the full town council have heard the budget. It's a first reading. It's the initial proposal brought by school leaders and town leaders to their governing boards, and there's a long process that follows that. Reading, vetting, understanding, changing.
Thank you for watching this episode of Inside Scarborough Public Schools, where we reviewed the entire budget process. Please join us next month as we go back into the schools to find out all of the great things that are happening with our students. I'm Julie Kukenberger, your superintendent, and thank you for watching Inside Scarborough Public Schools.